Two brilliant pianists emerged as Vienna's favorites in the early 19th century. Some audiences loved the impassioned energy of Beethoven. But others preferred the more refined playing of the former Mozart student Johann Nepomuk Hummel. Their supporters formed rival factions. Hummel's camp accused Beethoven of wringing noisy, unnatural music from the piano. But Beethovenites thought Hummel's playing was unimaginative and monotonous. It was a serious debate, one that reveals how Beethoven's revolutionary playing actually hurt his reputation among some contemporary audiences, and also how Hummel's post-Mozartian works, despite their modern-day neglect, were once largely preferred over Beethoven's. This is the long-forgotten story of Beethoven versus Hummel. This video is brought to you by Amadeus Apparel, purveyor of classical music-inspired shirts, with plenty of piano composers to choose from. Check it out and get 10% off with the link in the description. Now back to our story. Sometime around 1803, the young pianist and Beethoven pupil, Karl Czerny, attended a soiree in the Viennese home of Mozart's widow, Constanza. There he noticed an unfamiliar man with, quote, an unpleasant, common-looking face which twitched constantly, and utterly tasteless clothing, which seemed to indicate that he was some village schoolmaster. But then he played. Czerny had heard Vienna's best pianists before, Jelinek, Wölfel, Beethoven, but he had never experienced such dazzling difficulties. Word soon got around that this young talent was none other than Hummel, the same who had lived and studied with Mozart for 2 years, who went on a child prodigy tour across Europe, who took lessons from Haydn and Clementi, and who learned composition from Albrechtsberger and Salieri, the same teachers who had refined Beethoven's theoretical chops upon his arrival in Vienna. Hummel was fast becoming the city's next big star, one who might rival even a pianist as formidable as Beethoven. But Beethoven would be hard to topple. After years of battling the city's top virtuosos in highly publicized piano duels, he had most recently humiliated one pianist, Daniel Steibelt, who relied on his shallow tremolo technique and faked a clearly prepared improvisation. In their 1800 duel, Beethoven turned a page of Steibelt's music upside down and improvised on it so brilliantly that Steibelt left the room, refusing to meet Beethoven ever again. You can learn more about that by watching my in-depth video on this famous encounter. Unlike Steibelt, Hummel was no charlatan. He and Beethoven had played music together at private gatherings since the late 1790s. Hummel was 8 years younger, and he sincerely respected his colleague. "It was a serious moment for me when Beethoven appeared," he later recalled. "Was I to try to follow in the steps of such a genius? Finally, I said to myself that it was best to remain true to myself and to my own nature." In the debate between Beethoven and Hummel, it all came down to personal taste. Hummel was seen as the perfecter of Mozart's style. He was once called the modern Mozart of Germany. And like Mozart, Hummel used an animated, staccato touch, often with barely any sustain pedal. But Beethoven was known for his harmonious legato, connecting the notes by lingering on the keys and using more pedal than was usual for the time. His execution did not possess the pure and brilliant elegance of many other pianists, Czerny recalled, but Beethoven's performance of slow and sustained passages produced an almost magical effect upon every listener and, so far as I know, was never surpassed. Their use of the pedal was a significant point of departure. Because Hummel's music so directly descended from Mozart's, many passages didn't require the pedal at all. Hummel recommended the utmost moderation in pedaling, insisting that it was really most useful in slow movements. But Beethoven exploited the pedal long before it became ubiquitous in piano music, often holding it for long stretches at a time. Hummel's fans dismissed this as confused noise. With help from the pedal combined with his impassioned character, Beethoven achieved moments of sublime power at the piano. The extremely weak designs of pianos before 1810 or so couldn't endure Beethoven's gigantic style of performance, Czerny recalled, but his music only benefited as the piano grew over time. By contrast, Hummel's music was more well-suited to the shallow and light touch of contemporary Viennese pianos. What Hummel's virtuosity lacked in sheer power, it made up for in finesse. Czerny described Hummel's execution of difficulties as calculated and wisely gauged, but Beethoven would have rather played with the utmost expression at the cost of missing a few notes. Czerny insisted that nobody equaled Beethoven in the rapidity of his scales, double trills, skips, etc., not even Hummel. There was also the type of music they played and composed. Beethoven's fans dismissed Hummel's compositions as nothing but variants on Mozart and Haydn themes, and sometimes they had a point. Meanwhile, Beethoven's music was ahead of its time. Hummel's camp thought Beethoven wrung unnatural, unmelodic, irregular music from the piano. That may sound harsh to us today, but these listeners were grappling with something utterly new to them. Just imagine your ears being attuned to Haydn and Mozart sonatas all your life, and then one day you hear this. So who won the rivalry? Well, because Beethoven was ahead of his time, Czerny concluded that it was Hummel's purling, brilliant style, well calculated to suit the manner of the time, that was much more comprehensible and pleasing to the public, and which therefore made him the favored pianist in Vienna. But notice how Czerny only conceded that Hummel was more comprehensible and pleasing to the public, perhaps implying that more specialized music circles actually preferred Beethoven. The debate would have gradually died down after Beethoven stopped performing due to his increasing deafness. His performances fell off by the middle of the 1810s. Meanwhile, Hummel moved between Vienna and various court positions over the years, finally landing a steady post in Weimar. He and Beethoven didn't see one another for some 15 years, until 1827 when Hummel rushed to Vienna to visit Beethoven at his deathbed. The truth was, behind the public rivalry, they were friends, though they were never particularly close. The pianist Moscheles reported that they seemed to forget all of their differences during these emotional final encounters. In the ultimate show of support, Beethoven asked Hummel to take his spot for a concert that he was supposed to give because he knew he would not live long enough to see it. Hummel agreed, and when he took the stage just 2 weeks after Beethoven's death, he improvised with intense emotions, an eyewitness recalled, on the second movement of the 7th Symphony. After all those years and all the debates, Beethoven and Hummel were united in spirit not as rivals, but as fellow musicians and friends.